This video is a review of representation agreement forms produced by the BC government. My name is Joanne Taylor. I'm the Executive Director and Registrar of Nidus. This presentation is basic information. It is not legal advice. We have other videos covering other aspects of personal planning. Nidus is a BC-wide non-profit charitable organization established in 1995 by other community groups. Those groups were involved in a grassroots law reform of adult guardianship. Out of the reform came new legislation, including the Representation Agreement Act and legislation for healthcare consent. Nidus was set up to be a resource on the new legislation. We provide education and assistance. We also provide a registry service to help communicate important information and documents to those who need to know. Nidus is Latin for nest, a symbol of support and safety. Members of Nidus were involved in the drafting of the Representation Agreement Act. When the Act was passed in 1993, we were the first to draft representation agreement forms, and we tried them out at workshops with the public and gave feedback to government for implementation. When the law came into effect, we produced education materials with a sample representation agreement form. We are recognized as the Center for Excellence in Personal Planning and Supported Decision-Making. Some terminology to set the scene. Here's a chart showing types of planning. Estate planning is about making arrangements for after death, and the key legal document is the will. And then we have personal planning, which is about making arrangements for while you are alive in case you need assistance. You'll see there are 4 headings: health, personal, legal, and financial. They represent the 4 life areas or decision-making domains. We don't live our life in separate compartments, but there are laws and policies specific to each of those life areas. There's another container attached to health, and it's called advanced care planning. That's the term that the Ministry of Health and health authorities are using to encourage people to plan for healthcare matters. Nidus is using the term personal planning because it's not only about health or the care system, and we want to encourage people to make plans that cover all life areas because they are related. Because of the law reform, we have 2 paths for personal planning in British Columbia. We have the future path, the traditional path, for adults who understand the nature and effect of their planning documents at the time they are making them. However, there are adults whose capability to understand the nature and effect may be in question at the time of making their legal planning documents. This may apply to adults with a disability from birth, adults with advanced dementia, adult who's just had a serious stroke. They can still make plans, and they're on the Need Help Today path. There are different legal documents available depending on the path. Adults on the future path may make a Representation Agreement Section 9 to cover health and personal care matters. It's the most comprehensive document for those life areas. Legal and financial affairs can be covered by the Enduring Power of Attorney. It is the most comprehensive planning document for those life areas. Some people may be able to use the Representation Agreement Routine Financial and Legal Authorities under Section 7 to cover their legal financial situation. But most people will make an Enduring Power of Attorney, as it is the most comprehensive document for legal and financial affairs. On the Need Help Today path, for adults whose capability to understand the nature and effect of their documents, they may make a representation agreement Section 7 to cover some aspects of all 4 life areas. Planning for incapacity, end of life, and other support needs is a new and emerging area for law and healthcare. And Nidus is trying to bridge the gap because we don't want planning to become professionalized or medicalized or legalized. It needs to be accessible. And Nidus has important experience and knowledge to share from our work with the public over many years. This feedback is about how we can do things better together. The following comments on representation agreement forms are not intended to suggest people write their own legal documents. There are many requirements in the law and it can be risky and we believe unnecessary to do it yourself. The government forms meet the legal requirements. We are highlighting ways that the wording could be more accessible if the forms might be revised. Nidus has forms on our website, and we share example wording with legal professionals. So there are many options. The Ministry of Attorney General published the Government Representation Agreement forms on September 1st, 2011. The forms are available on the government website under Incapacity Planning. The government forms are also included in the My Voice booklet, Guide to Advanced Care Planning, that was published by the Ministry of Health in 2012 and again in 2013. We have a separate video with feedback on the My Voice booklet as care providers and the public find it confusing and there are some inaccuracies. The value of publicly available sample forms is to provide a short and simple legal document and an example of best practice. And so we were excited when we heard that government was going to produce a sample form in 2011. And it can also provide a model that perhaps discourages legal professionals from creating long, complex, legalistic forms that few can understand and that are not helpful in healthcare settings where time is critical. So the purpose of government publishing forms was to make representation agreements more accessible. Unfortunately, the government forms are not accessible. Some wording used, which is not required by the law, creates extra steps, more paperwork, and costs. Nidus was not asked for input on the forms, although we gave input on some of the other documents that were produced prior to September 1st, 2011. But in terms of the forms, we had negotiated wording for routine financial authority with the Canadian Bankers Association that is helpful for the Representation Agreement Section 7. For accessibility, Nidus decided to publish representation agreement forms on the website for the public to use, and we told government and others about our concerns and that we would be doing that. The BC Government Representation Agreement forms are not presented from the perspective of the 2 paths for personal planning, the future path with the Representation Agreement Section 9 and an enduring power of attorney as the most comprehensive documents, or the Need Help Today path using the Representation Agreement Section 7. And this can lead to error. And in fact, the Ministry of Attorney General contacted Nidus in 2013 about this. The ministry staff were concerned that people were not making the types of legal documents they need because of the way the government forms are presented. So some people were making the Representation Agreement Section 7 even though they met the capability requirements to make a Representation Agreement Section 9 and an enduring power of attorney. And they may need those extra authorities in those documents. But when they looked at the way the representation agreement section 7 was presented, it appeared that it would be sufficient. Now we're going to look at some specific issues about the government forms. Some of these are tips that Nidus has learned from many years, so they might be helpful for a revision, and some are highlighting our concerns. This is a screenshot of the Government Representation Agreement Section 9 form, the first page, and it starts with naming who the agreement belongs to, and they're called the adult. However, it doesn't explain on the form or the accompanying notes that in British Columbia, the age of adulthood is 19 years or older. And it's different in different provinces, so there is some confusion about that. It would be helpful to be clear. There's also no mention of capability requirements for making a representation agreement section 9. In terms of the setup of the form, we would suggest adding space for the adult's common name or nickname. There's a space for the full legal name of the adult, but we know that people sometimes have a name that isn't even one of their legal names, or they go by their middle name, and that's helpful information. There's also no explanation or direction about what date to fill in here, and that can sometimes create confusion for people. The next heading or section on the form has to do with revocation or canceling of previous representation agreements. So the form refers you to look at the notes, and it also has a statement in the agreement itself. When you look at the notes, they seem to contradict themselves, so it's not clear what to do. And there are specific requirements in the legislation for making a legal revocation. And our concern is that there could be a problem if this is not followed correctly. So Nidus would not put in a standard statement. Rather, we have information about how to revoke or cancel a previous agreement according to the legislation, and we have a form that people can use. And we give people direction as to what to do to let others know. The next heading is for naming the representative, and we would suggest having space to put the representative's phone number as well as there is space for the name and the address, but since the form covers healthcare, that can be handy to have a phone number for reaching the representative quickly. And we have always had space in this section of naming the representative to list the relationship of the representative to the adult, spouse, child, friend. And again, that's very informative and we think part of good practice. Then the next section is for naming an alternate representative, and we would always encourage people to have a backup. The government form says that an alternate representative would act if the representative dies, resigns, is the adult spouse and their relationship breaks down, or if the representative becomes incapable. There are only 4 circumstances, and this wording is not required by the law, and listing only 4 circumstances is not sufficient. There could be other circumstances, including if the representative is temporarily away on a vacation or respite, as we encourage caregivers to do. The form says that evidence that an alternate can move up and replace a representative is provided in a statutory declaration, a legal form. And depending on the circumstance, the healthcare provider may be waiting for that form because they have to have that before allowing an alternate to act. And the form needs to state which of the 4 circumstances has occurred and some description of that. So you can't be made ahead of time. You have to wait till it happens. The healthcare provider may need to select someone as a temporary substitute decision maker in the meantime if a decision needs to be made and they're still waiting for this statutory declaration. However, a TSDM does not have as much authority as a representative, and they have different duties. And the point is that it wasn't what the adult wanted because they made a representation agreement. The other thing to note is that the statutory declaration form says it must be signed by a commissioner authorized for taking affidavits in BC. There's no list of who those people are or where they are, although a lawyer or notary public would have that same authority. The next section about listing instructions or wishes, it says it's optional, but there's lines to fill something in, and I think people often feel that they should. But we would say that that can be a recipe for disaster because wishes can backfire. We encourage people to discuss wishes and to do it on an ongoing basis. And if they do put something in writing, to do it on a separate paper so it can be updated, changed if necessary without having to go through the legal requirements of making a representation agreement. But it can also be given to the representative and alternate so that they can pull it out if needed at the right time. But writing wishes in this space is a challenge. And we recently had a referral from the Alzheimer's Society of BC because a gentleman with dementia had written something in his representation agreement. He used the government form and in this space. And he was trying to be helpful. But unfortunately, what he wrote tied the hands of his representative, who was also his spouse and caregiver, and backfired on him because it delayed getting help, it required more cost, and it caused a lot of anguish. And when you write something in your representation agreement, then it's open to various interpretations, including the health authority. And so that's what happened when the representative presented the agreement to the health authority in order to do something. The health authority said no. Based on what's written there, you're going to have to go through some other steps. So as I say, it caused delay and other costs. The government produced a representation agreement section 7 form, and there are some of the same issues with that we have discussed for the RA9 form. Not providing information about the age of adulthood, making space to list a common name. The wording and notes about revocation is confusing. The alternate only being able to move up if one of 4 circumstances have occurred, and getting that confirmed by a statutory declaration signed by someone in BC. However, there are some things in the representation agreement section 7 form in particular. So the first one is under authority of representative. And it says, I authorize my representative to A, help me make decisions, B, make decisions on my behalf. And the instructions say that you can leave both of them or you can cross one of them out. And I have to say I was very shocked to see this because decision making is on a continuum, And the idea of selecting A or B is completely against the intent of the law reform and the wording in the legislation, which was designed to reflect that intent and the reality of decision making. And there was never any discussion of separating these functions. And it has the potential to create problems, especially for third parties, if one of these is crossed out, because who's going to monitor it or enforce it, or what does it mean? The law says that my representative may help me to make decisions or make decisions on my behalf. And that was to recognize the continuum and the fact that I may need, a little bit of help or more help with decisions. If I'm unconscious, I will need somebody to make decisions on my behalf. And that wording was also very important to the Alzheimer's Society of BC, who were one of the lead organizations in the law reform, because people with dementia, their capability fluctuates and their need for help with decision making is best served by having that flexibility in the wording. So that is something to watch out for. Also under authority of representative, further down, it lists the 4 aspects of 4 life areas that you can address in the representation agreement, section 7. And it says that you can cross out one or more. But again, it's risky to invite people to strike out wording on a legal form when there is so little knowledge about the implications among professionals, let alone among the community or the public. And the same comment here, where there's a space to list the monitor, but it says, strike out this provision if you don't require it or you don't want to name a monitor. But there are circumstances where a monitor is required. And so this can be very confusing for people. And we have actually seen agreements where people have left it blank or crossed it out when in fact they need to name a monitor. And I think the challenge here is that people need a place to check or a place to call. And we have the knowledge. We used to have the resources to provide this service, a helpline for people, so they don't make mistakes, because this is about their life and their future. We no longer have sufficient funding to provide that service, but there's clearly a need for it. I mentioned that Nidus has information and forms on our website. If you go to our website, on the home page, you will see there are 3 photos and headings. For those of you on the future path who understand the nature and effect of the documents that you're going to make, you will go in the middle photo. Click on the middle photo and the middle heading and find information and links. If you are helping an adult who has a disability from birth or childhood and they need assistance, and their capability to understand the nature and effect of documents on the future path is in question, then you would click on the first photo, the first heading. If you're helping adults with advanced dementia or serious stroke or other condition where they need assistance, they didn't make plans when they were considered capable of understanding, but they need help. So you'll click on the third photo, the third heading, and find links to information and forms. It's very important to go in the right door, or you won't find the information and forms that are relevant to the situation. Thank you for joining us. I hope you'll visit the website. We have lots of information, and perhaps you'll watch other videos as well.